Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to see so many faces and names here today for this really important conversation and question and answer live section with experts in this field. My name is Kristen Trupa. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Deputy Director here at Youth Collaboratory. I am joined by my colleague, Diamond Dumas, who will be behind the scenes and also doing moderating questions later on in the event today. She is a training capacity building associate with Youth Collaboratory. We are super excited to partner with our colleagues at Center Budget and Policy Priorities in getting this important resource into your hands timely and into the hands of the young people that you know. In that spirit, let me stop talking and hand this over to Tim to get us started.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everyone. My name is Tim Solanki. I go by the pronouns he, him, his, and I'm part of the outreach team for the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. We are so excited to meet you all here today in collaboration with Youth Collaboratory to talk about tax credit accessibility for the youth population. So for a little bit of information about the center, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, or the CBPP for short, is a nonpartisan research and policy institute that works at the federal and state levels on fiscal policy and public programs to help reduce poverty and inequality and in equitable and effective ways. Specifically, we at the Get It Back campaign are focused on the national effort to inform eligible people on how they can receive their tax benefits. We are helping to promote the CTC, free tax preparation, tax benefits, and very importantly, why we're here today, to help promote the EITC and free tax assistance. But before we get started, we'd love to know more about the folks joining today. So if you could please leave your name, pronouns, location, and organization if you're a part of one in chat. Also, if you have any questions as we go through the presentation, please go ahead and add to the chat, and we'll try to get to all of your questions during today's webinar. But before we dive into the content, I wanted to hand it back to Kristen for a brief introduction of Youth Collaboratory.
Thanks, Tim. So I want to make sure I get that mute button off. For those of you that aren't familiar with Youth Collaboratory, we are a national organization and the focus is on harnessing the power of the youth services community to innovate, evaluate, and drive effective strategies that assure safety and well-being for youth and young adults, unlocking their limited potential. I want to give you an idea of the scope of our work. So as a national organization, we have a broad reach. We annually engage with about 18,000 stakeholders and provide training or support to about 3,000 of those stakeholders per year. When it comes to the research and innovation, like what are the cutting edge pieces we try to support, our membership attracts innovators in the field with over 200 member organizations, over 46 states providing support to young people in their communities that are experiencing different challenges and using a strengths-based approach to the work that we do. We also have opportunities to work with organizations locally to unearth innovations in research and provide subgrants in order to do that. I think the most important part of how we do our work is we work in authentic collaboration with youth and young adults. These are young people with lived expertise that inform all aspects of our work. As paid consultants, part of our Youth Catalyst team, to full-time staff members, supporting that clear alignment of purpose to outcomes. We rely on that big breadth and depth of reach to determine our focus areas, like where we're going to spend our time, because we can't do everything. So these are the areas in which we are spending our time in our focus areas. They're around coordinated community responses to youth and young adult homelessness, preventing and addressing relationship violence, sexual exploitation, and trafficking of youth, and supporting opportunities for young people to build community with family, peers, and others to enhance their assets, further strengths, and develop lasting connections. It's important to note that we strive to ground all of our work in equity and authentic youth collaboration. You can learn more about these three focus areas, our Youth Catalyst team, and all of our initiatives. You're going to the website. I think that Diamond's going to drop into the chat for you. Tim, now I'm going to hand this right back to you to get on with the important content. And again, thank you all for being here.
Awesome, thank you. So I thought it would be a great idea to start off with a poll just to gauge everyone's knowledge about the EITC. So if we want to start that first, that'd be, and give everyone a little bit of time too. answer it before we move on. Okay, awesome. It looks like this webinar is going to be super helpful. Almost half of the people only have a basic understanding, so I think that it will be great to dive in deeper. So I guess we can start with a run through for the agenda today. So first, we would like to introduce to you the EITC and give a basic overview about what it is. Next, we'll explain the new eligibility surrounding the recently expanded version and give examples of available resources that people can use to claim it through free tax filing services. Then we'll talk about some ways that both service providers and individuals in the youth population can conduct outreach. And then I thought it would be a good idea to go over potential next steps before, and introduce some outreach materials before we start in with the Q&A. So for the first time, youth and young adults ages 18 to 24 who work and don't have kids are able to get money from the federal government to boost their income through the EITC. And what is the EITC? The EITC is the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a tax credit that is designed to give workers with lower income money back at tax season or potentially lower the federal taxes that they owe. This refund is available for people with or without dependents. And for tax year 2021, this means that for a single adult with no children, this could be as much money as $1,502. And for a married family with 3 or more children, this could be as much as $6,728. And then for people who are not raising children, there are 2 main requirements that need to be met before you can claim this benefit. You must earn an income and you must have a social security number. This earned income could be through the form of wages, tips, salary, self-employment, gig work income, and more. And just to reiterate, individuals could receive up to $1,502. Oh, and a social security number must also need to be held by each member of the household. And it is important to note that you cannot claim the federal EITC with an ITIN. And an ITIN is an individual taxpayer identification number. So, and like I mentioned before, for individuals with no children, they could receive up to $1,502, which is a large amount. Then moving on, for those who are raising kids, you must have a qualifying child based on 3 factors. Those are relationship, age, and the child must live with you for more than 6 months of the year. And if you are raising kids, you may also qualify for the expanded child tax credit, which is another type of tax refund. And you can get up to $3,600 for each child under the age of 6 and up to $3,000 for children between the ages of 6 and 17. So next we'll move on to how to claim the EITC and what free tax filing services and options are available. So specifically, we at the outreach team are heavily focused on EITC outreach and making sure that people who qualify for the EITC know about it and are just able to get the assistance that they need to receive it. One of the main opportunities that we see with this new EITC expansion is reaching these demographics who are newly eligible. So there's a huge demographic of young adults that were previously ineligible to qualify who now are able to qualify. But either many of these young adults don't know about the new EITC expansion, or just still think that they don't qualify. And for tax year 2021, those who are not claiming children are able to file if they are 19 years or older. Students who are at least 24 years old are now able to claim the EITC as well. And qualified homeless youth or former qualified foster youth are now eligible to receive the EITC starting from the age of 18. However, it is important to note that students who are 19 to 24 cannot claim it if they are a full-time student or part-time student for more than 5 months of the year. And also, I just wanted to reiterate the fact that the maximum value of the credit for individuals without children almost tripled from $538
He plays both
um,
sides. I was like, what do you mean by
to
playing both sides? She talks to
$1,502.
you, she talks to Joanne, she talks to whoever else is here. I mean, she can sympathize with everybody. There's nothing wrong.
Hello, can everyone please make sure that you are muted? Please make sure you're muted. Thank you.
Then another concern that we wanted to address today is that of filing taxes after the deadline of April 18th. If people are owed a refund and do not owe taxes, they can still file after April 18th. Additionally, people can claim a refund for up to 3 previous years, and there's no penalty for filing after the deadline as long as you don't owe taxes. The main concern is that after April 18th, not as many free or paid tax preparers will be available to assist in tax filing. But even after April 18th, there are still ways to file your taxes for free. Here are a couple options. One of the ways that people can receive tax assistance even after the filing deadline is through getyourrefund.org. And getyourrefund.org is a free and virtual site where you can file your own tax return, or they also have a virtual tax preparation service, which is available until October 15th. Another great resource to use, if you can, are volunteer income tax assistance sites, or VITA sites for short. And these are free IRS certified programs that will help you file your tax returns. The only downside to this is that many VITA sites do close shortly after the tax season, but some will stay open through summer. And actually, there is a VITA site locator, which we have linked on this slide. And it's through the IRS, and they can help you, and it will help you identify sites that are operating in your area. Next, we'll talk about the ways that both youth and service providers can conduct outreach. But before we do, we have another poll asking how many people do you know who may have not claimed the EITC? And so we'll give people a little bit of time to answer this before moving on. Okay, so the results are in, and there's actually the majority of people who do know, people who have not claimed the EITC, who are eligible. So this is great. So now we'll talk about some really effective but simple outreach methods that everyone can do, but particularly the youth. So firstly, one of the easiest methods is by texting your friends. And this method is so simple, but it's super effective because it is so much more personal than sending out an email or a flyer. And we actually do have linked available text scripts that people can use and just copy and paste through their phone. And then another method is by posting on social media. As everyone knows, social media is a massively growing communications tool and is just one of the fastest ways to raise awareness. It's fairly simple, and it has the potential outreach to reach a large number of people. And we actually have provided social media graphics and messaging kits that people can use to post to places like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And if you want to get really creative, we do encourage you to post to videos to TikTok as well. And then kind of moving on to slightly more in-depth outreach, service providers can help in a variety of ways. So firstly, they can advertise this information in places that youth particularly frequent. So this could include places like community centers, schools, drop-in centers, public parks, and more. And service providers can also help their clients file taxes and share tax filing resources. Also, another method is that if service providers organizations do have large followings, it could also be super helpful to post to places like social media, just so that way they can contact a more encompassing following. And then lastly, one of the main barriers to tax filing that we're seeing is the lack of computers or internet access. So it would be such a huge help if service providers could lead their clients to places with computers or internet access, or even set up a hotspot. And that could be just a huge way to start individuals in their filing process. But before we open up our webinar for the Q&A section, we thought it would be good to briefly go over some available resources to help get anyone's outreach started. So firstly, we have the John Burton Advocates for Youth, or JBAY for short, and jbay.org has national and California specific resources on tax filing and tax credits. Secondly, there's schoolhouseconnection.org, and Schoolhouse Connection has a bunch of resources on EITC, such as policy summaries, email templates, and basic information on how to file your taxes and more. Thirdly, we have the National Network for Youth, and they have a state-by-state guide to getting IDs for youth experiencing homelessness, which are usually needed when going to a Vita site as well. And then lastly, we have the Get It Back campaigns, EITC and CTC outreach toolkits, which include flyers, messaging and earned media materials, call-in text scripts, and more that are available for public use. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to any of our organizations, and you can visit either of our websites to look at more of our outreach materials and subscribe to our newsletter. Now, moving on to the Q&A portion. Again, I just want to reiterate that you can leave any questions that you have in the chat box, and I will hand it over to my colleagues, Roxy, who is the EITC campaign director, and she'll be able to answer all of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you so much to everyone for joining. I saw lots of questions in the chat, so I think this will be a great time to help make sure that you all are familiar with the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Hi, Roxy. Diamond Dumas here. Kristen previously mentioned me. I have collected all of the questions from the chat, and the first one I would like to pose to you is, what if a youth is an emancipated minor who files their own taxes? Would they qualify for this?
So this is a question I actually want to do a little bit more research on, because there are these age requirements to get the Earned Income Tax Credit if you aren't raising children. And so as Tim mentioned, with this expansion, it's available to people from 19 years old and 18 years old if they are experiencing homelessness or if they have experience with the foster care system. If someone is younger than that and is an emancipated youth, there are just a couple of questions around that. So I am going to follow up with Youth Collaboratory so that they can pass on the information once I find it documented from a reputable source.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Someone also asked that if a child was born in the year 2022, can they still claim the tax credit for last year, or do they have to wait until the following year if it is offered then?
Yes, so the way the tax credits work is for children, if you have a child that you're claiming, it needs to match the actual tax year. So if a child was born in 2022, they can be claimed on a tax return that's filed next year, because next year is when we're actually filing for 2022. So right now we're filing taxes for 2021. So children born in 2021 count. And at this time, I would like to introduce my colleague, Jenny Wong, who has just joined us for Q&A and is also available to help answer questions.
Well, nice to meet you, Jenny. Thank you for joining us. So I will open this to either of you. The next question is, can you please reiterate some of the minimum requirements in order to qualify for the EITC?
Sure, I can do that. Or Tim, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can take that one. So the minimum requirements for the EITC were that you must have an earned income. And like I reiterated, and you must have a social security number, but the earned income could also come in the form of wages, tips, salary, self-employment or gig work, military benefits, and more. And then a social security number must also be held by each member of the household. And it is important to note that you cannot claim the EITC with an ITIN, which is an individual taxpayer identification number.
Thank you. And I'd like to just add that one of the great things about the Earned Income Tax Credit and why we have a campaign that spends a lot of time focusing on outreach for this credit is that there is not a minimum income that is required to get this tax credit. So if someone works and they earn $1 during the year, they may be eligible to receive the EITC. So while there's not a minimum, there are maximums to be eligible for the credit.
Awesome. Thank you so much for restating that. Focusing in on the foster care part, would a youth that is over the age of 18 who has been in the foster care system, but then was later adopted, be able to claim the EITC?
So their eligibility will be based on their status in 2021. So if they were adopted in 2021, then they would not be eligible. My understanding is, someone else can share if they have a different understanding. My understanding is they would not be eligible to get the EITC if they are at that time living with their adopted family. Does anyone else have other experiences with that situation?
Maybe we could look into that, because Roxy, would that depend on if they were being claimed as a dependent or not?
Well, with the EITC, there's kind of like this rule where even if you can be claimed as a dependent, then you cannot claim the EITC for yourself. And there's always this question of, well, how does someone know if someone didn't claim them on the return? So it's one of those kind of more nuanced areas. So yeah, we can follow up, do a little bit more research and follow up on that one too.
Thank you. So on the similar line, in terms of if someone turned 25 the year of the tax credit, so say potentially in August of last year, they turned 25, can they still file for this? Is it based off of their birth date or is it based off of the tax deadline?
Yes, so, oh, Jenny, were you gonna go for it?
Oh no, I just don't know. Like, I don't know if you're like sick of answering all the questions.
Go for it.
Okay, great. So there is not a maximum age requirement. So this tax credit is for people of any age. And previously, the rule used to be that people below 25 were not eligible and people over 65 were not eligible. So it's more that like, it used to be that only people 25 to 64 were eligible so people without kids were only eligible between 25 and 64, but now it is that people outside of those age ranges are also eligible. So when you turn 25, you can still claim it.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much. is this tax credit annually given, or is it only due to the recent events with COVID-19 and the pandemic?
Oh, sorry, go for it. Oh, okay. It's a little bit of both. So it is an annual tax credit, but this recent change where it is worth more money. So I think you all heard it's worth up to $1,500 for people who are not raising kids for the current tax year. And in the regular tax years, it would be about $500 for the maximum for people without children. So it's still there outside of this tax year, but it is not worth as much. And then the expansion to people who are 19 to 24 is also temporary. So if those expansions do not stay, so if those like kind of COVID pandemic relief expansions don't stay, then yes, that part of the tax credit will not be annual. I'm not sure if I explained that well.
I was able to understand that, and if anyone has any follow-up to that or needs a point of clarity, feel free to drop it in the chat and we can relift it up again. So moving on to thinking about where this income comes from. If people did volunteer work or work that was under the table and therefore paid in cash, does that still qualify them as having received some sort of employment to receive the credit?
So this one is a little bit more tricky. So you do have to have earned income to be eligible for the credit. So if you're doing volunteer work and you aren't getting paid anything, then unfortunately you're not eligible for the EITC. If you are getting paid a stipend or in cash, you should be eligible. However, when you are filing your taxes, you have to include documentation of your income. So if you don't have that source, usually it's a W-2. If you don't have that, then you may not be able to actually get this tax credit. However, I do want to share, while we're focused on the earned income tax credit, this question related to pandemic relief came up, and some people may be eligible for stimulus payments that they did not get in the past. There were 3 rounds of stimulus payments that were issued in 2020 and 2021. And when people are filing taxes right now, there's an opportunity to get the 3rd stimulus payment if you missed it. And with that, there isn't an income requirement. So if someone meets the eligibility guidelines for that, then they may be eligible to get that credit.
Thank you. And for the folks who have not applied or filed for their taxes yet, is the tax credit applied automatically, say if you went through a site like TurboTax, or do you have to input this manually?
So different tax software programs are set up in different ways, and a lot of the programs, they're designed to ask you questions, and in that series of asking questions, it should be able to determine if you're eligible for the EITC. Software isn't perfect and it may miss something. So if someone has filed their taxes already and they're looking back and they see, hey, I don't think I actually got the earned income tax credit. Well, first you want to go ahead and review your tax return if you filed already. And if you didn't get it, then there is an opportunity to amend your return so that you can get it. But for the question of does the software automatically determine it? Generally, yes. But there are sometimes like additional questions or the way the questions are worded that it may be a little misleading for people. So Jenny has put in the chat the link to getyourrefund.org, and that is a resource that we highly recommend for people to get support to file their taxes. We recommend that over paid services and other services. And part of the reason is that that platform is very user-friendly. It's designed to ask questions in a way that is straightforward. Also, it is staffed by people who are trained volunteer income tax assistants, volunteer income tax assistance site volunteers. So there are people are available that have training that can help people if needed. There's also a platform that is designed to help people file their own returns, providing a lot of guidance to do that on your own in a file myself system. So there are options through that service.
Thank you. And just to take a step back quickly, we had a follow-up question to your comment about the stimulus check. So can you still get the third stimulus check if you were claimed as a dependent?
You cannot. So the person who claimed you as the dependent would have gotten the stimulus check.
Thank you so much for that clarity. And then just to be clear, if you are a full-time college student, you are not eligible to receive the EITC?
I can take this one. So yes, if you're a student who is 19 to 24, you cannot claim it if you are a full-time or part-time student for more than 5 months of the year.
Okay, and an attendee had a general question about the people that they support, and what if they have multiple W-2s, my apologies, that are not from 1 year? How do they go about filing those multiple W-2s that are spread throughout the years?
They'd have to file separate tax returns for each tax year that they have. And not every software or preparer will let you do that. So Get Your Refund is one of those services where they can file taxes for past years. And for the EITC, you can also get that for past years. You can get it for 3 past tax seasons. So you have 3 years to claim any tax credits from past years.
That's awesome information. Roxy, I know you mentioned previously that it's always the tricky part to figure out, was I claimed, was I not claimed? Is there a way for folks to go to any sort of website or find out if they were claimed as a dependent or not?
Yes, so unfortunately, no, there is not one website or database to determine this. So if there is a young adult who thinks that they may be eligible for the EITC, but they're not sure if somebody's claimed them as a dependent, there are 2 approaches that they could take. One is to, if they're able to, actually ask the person that they think may have claimed them. And if that line of communication is not available, if it's not safe, then it would be best for them to go ahead and file a tax return themselves. If they were claimed, then their return will be rejected. It will not be processed because it's noted that they've already been claimed as a dependent. So that would be, those are the main options to determine that.
Thank you so much. And on a similar vein, in talking about the folks who have potentially filed their taxes already and didn't claim the credit, though they qualify, what steps can they take to amend their tax return to claim the EITC?
Yes, so first you want to make sure that your tax return has been processed. So if you recently filed and you realize that you didn't get the EITC, go ahead and wait until you know that the IRS has processed your return. Once your return has been processed, then you can go through the steps of amending your return. And what that looks like is there is a specific tax form, 1040X, for amending your return, and you would complete that. That is a form that must be mailed. It cannot be completed electronically. So knowing that it has to be mailed, you should be prepared that there will be a delay in the processing, that it could take some time. But that's the basic process for doing that. And you cannot amend through TurboTax.
Thank you for pointing that out. I have a question for the parents out there. So if your parents do not file taxes jointly, but they file independently, are both parents allowed to claim the EITC?
If both parents could claim the EITC, but they do not file taxes jointly, they cannot both claim the EITC. They have to decide. There are some kind of like tiebreaker rules, but for them, if they share like really equal custody, they'll have to decide who can claim the child. This honestly does get pretty tricky, because then what happens is you have situations, the best way to resolve this is for the two people to communicate who is going to claim the child and make a decision together. But in the case that doesn't happen, where there's not a good relationship, or like you just can't communicate with the other parent, there are a couple steps that you can take. I'm gonna drop a link in the chat to this, because it's kind of complicated to explain, but basically you want to get the tax return in as soon as possible in the tax year, if you think you are the parent who should be claiming the child. Otherwise, you can still file a tax return, but it will be rejected. But there are still steps to take, even if it is rejected. But it is not a great system, and it is complicated. So I'll drop that in the chat.
Thank you for sharing that resource. I've got a couple more questions left. So if anyone hasn't asked the question that you have burning inside of you, please feel free to drop it in the chat so I can uplift it. But my next question focuses on, Jenny, you mentioned the past, that this year is basically an expansion of the tax credit. So if you qualified for the tax credit in past years, but never applied for it, can you apply for those back years that you qualified this year?
Yeah, so for example, if you qualified, say in 2020 with the laws that were in place in 2020, then you can still go back and get that EITC, but you would not get the expanded amount, because the expanded amount is only for tax year 2021. So you just have to look at whatever year it is, you have to look at whatever the current tax laws were for that year.
And how would you go about doing something like that, trying to get the money from those previous tax credits?
You would have to file a separate tax return for every year that you think you're eligible for it. I think if you think that you're eligible for credits from the past, it probably makes sense to just try to file just to see, because you might be missing out on money in your tax refund. Again, get your refund. They do return model that they can take you through the process and make sure that you get all the credits that you can from the past 3 years.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like Get Your Refund is like the best one-stop shop. Like no matter what your question is, they have the resources for you and are willing to do it. So thank you so much for uplifting them. Let's see what else we have here. So for the folks who are potentially in that entanglement of being claimed as a dependent, though they have been independent, is there a way to flag a social security number or a tax identification number so that way no one else can claim them on their taxes?
So the IRS has started issuing what's called IP pins, identity protection pins, for partially for this purpose. And so you can apply for an IP pin, and with that you will have to use that number that is assigned to the person, whether it's a dependent or yourself, every year that you file a tax return. So that is the best way to kind of flag it. There's not, to my knowledge, another way of doing that. And that is something that has come up a lot. Jenny had linked the custody blog in the chat. And so for a lot of people dealing with custody issues, the IP pin is a recommended step for protection in the future.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much for dropping that link. So this one is kind of a combination of all the things. So someone was previously a dependent, but when they were a dependent, the person filing did not claim the EITC. So can that person now, as an independent, go back and get that former money from when they were a dependent?
So this kind of circles back to one of the questions from before. Technically, no, because you are, as Jenny mentioned, you are operating under the rules for that specific tax year. So if you were a dependent, let's say in 2019, and you're no longer a dependent now, you can't just go back to the 2019 and say you want to get it for yourself because you were actually a dependent at that time.
Okay, great. I think all the questions have been answered unless any come in shortly on the chat. To address the last one that I see here, can you please just reiterate some of the key things that Get Your Refund offers for folks?
I can pull up, let me just pull up what their website says. Okay, so I'm gonna just be reading this from the website because we're not experts on Get Your Refund. So what they have is they have basically 3 models of service. There's a do-it-yourself model where you file for yourself. There is a full service model where someone like takes you through the entire return. And then there's another model coming up that'll be available this summer. So they, sorry, I'm pulling it up as we speak. Actually, Roxy, do you know if they have like a graph of like all the services they provide? I'm trying to look for this.
I think they have just the chart on the different the methods to file your taxes. We can follow up on the amendments. I know that they do file current year returns, and they also can file prior year returns. But I would need to check on the amendment. I would like to say probably not, because that is a form that cannot be submitted electronically. You have to mail it, but they may have an option where they'll prepare it and you just print it yourself. So let's check on that.
They actually, sorry, Roxy, I just found
Yeah,
it.
okay.
Does say that they do file amendments for past years.
Excellent.
Mhm.
So if there's one thing that you all take away from today's presentation, remember getyourrefund.org.
Thank you so much, Tim, Roxy, Jenny, for being here. I greatly appreciate your time and the collaboration that has gone into this presentation. I will pass it back to my colleague, Kristen.
Sorry, can you guys all hear me? There we are. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Diamond, for leading the moderating the questions. Roxy, Jenny, Tim, thank you so much for all that you've shared. We still have a few minutes if folks want to drop in questions. We wanted to make sure that you had in front of you how to contact us. The Get It Back campaign, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, there's their contact information. And obviously Youth Collaboratory's contact information as well, our general information. Roxy, is there any, or Tim, Jenny, any concerns with us sending out slides afterwards to folks that registered? All right, we were going to send out those slides afterwards. We've also recorded this so that we can get this information out. We had all had such great questions, and I love the specificity, I can't say that word, how specific they were. And I think this is an opportunity to really kind of just talk to the experts and get some real clear answers. And I appreciate too the opportunity to come back with Roxy and Jenny both said they're going to get some more information, and we can bring that back to you as well. And we'll make sure if you're registered, we'll get those answers to those additional questions out to you. I know that Benita just dropped in an evaluation link. We'd love to get your feedback. Both the center and Youth Collaboratory take that feedback very seriously. So please complete that evaluation. Any last questions, thoughts, anything else you would like to share, Jenny, Roxy, or Tim, before we sign off?
Thanks so much again for your participation and for your interest and for the work that you'll be doing to help connect young adults to the Earned Income Tax Credit and any other tax benefits that they may be eligible for.
Great, thank you. So we'll be signing off. We'll stick on for the next minute or so. We'll let you listen to some music on your way out the door. Feel free to continue to drop in questions if there's any last questions that come to mind. And I think we'll drop the evaluation one more time into the chat. And thank you all again. Look forward to seeing you in a future event and look forward to seeing a lot of young people with more money in their pocket.